I think there is one unforgivable curse that is the worst of the three by a long shot. I don't even think it's close. And if I'm honest, you could ask anyone else in the world who enjoys the series, and I think you'd get the same answer. But to be honest, I don't think it will be my answer. I think the answer is just going to be different for every person. For me, I think the Imperious Curse is by far the most evil out of all the unforgivable curses. But I have heard people talk about the Cruciatus Curse as the worst. And obviously, a ton of people talk about how Avada Kedavra is the worst curse, as the books kind of lean into. It kind of reminds me a bit of that moment in the books when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are discussing the Deathly Hallows. Then they all deem which one they know to be the best one, and they all come up with different answers. Ron says the Elder Wand, Harry the Resurrection Stone, and Hermione the Invisibility Cloak. And they all say their answers and the different reasons that they have, and they are all perfectly legitimate. And I want to argue in this video for why I think out of the three unforgivable curses, Imperio, or the ability to control another person, is easily the worst curse. In this whole series, it really is set up to confirm that Avada Kedavra is the worst out of all the curses. I mean, not only does Moody just save it for last, or rather Barty Crouch Jr., but the whole setup seems to imply that Avada Kedavra is the worst curse. Even the very way that you make a Horcrux is by killing. The very way that you can split your soul is by taking the life of another person. And I'm never really going to disagree with the fact that the killing curse is reprehensible and tragic. It's an unforgivable curse for a reason. But a curse I slightly hate a bit more, actually not slightly, I hate this significantly more, is the Cruciatus Curse. For movie fans, that might seem laughable, but for book fans, you feel it a bit more because you know about the background of a one Neville Longbottom, who had to endure this quietly for his whole life. And I have to say that I am a bit partial to this too, because Neville is maybe my favorite character in the whole series. And the slow revelation of his background and his character transformation is second to none for me. But when you learn about what his parents endured, and how Neville, he was taught to live through this every single day, where his parents are just driven into insanity because they had the Cruciatus Curse performed on them, it just makes you hate this curse that much more. It actually infuriates me. And every time I see this used in the movies, and I know the potential of this curse, I get sick to my stomach thinking about the childhood of Neville and what that must have been like. But this is still a strange conundrum, because I think I'd rather have the Cruciatus Curse performed on me than Avada Kedavra, because it's probably a rare thing to have someone torture you for so long that you actually lose your mind. So I'd rather that one than death. And I'm sure a lot of people probably think the same. The Imperious Curse has the greatest potential for evil, and is easily one of the scariest things for me. Think of the application that it's used for in the books. To be honest, relatively harmless things. It's a children's book after all, but Stan Shunpike is said to be under the Imperious Curse, which we never really get confirmation on in the books. Draco uses it to Imperious Madame Rosmerta so that he can attempt to curse Katie Bell, and just obtain some intel and information. And then Harry uses it. And because Harry is good, he uses it for good. He uses it to break into Gringotts, but before he leaves, he actually hides Yaxley in a really, really funny section of the books, who he has Imperious because Harry knows that it's going to be dangerous. So the Imperious Curse in the hands of a good wizard really isn't going to do much damage. But to someone desperate or wicked, it is downright scary. There's a section in the books that really isn't in the movies at all that I want to talk about that bears significant similarity to the Imperious Curse, even though it's not. So just bear with me. It's a love potion. And if you have ever listened to the podcast that I have about Harry Potter called Harry Potter and the First Time Readers, you know how much I abhor the idea of a love potion. Between two consenting adults, it could be a fun night, But I think it's a beyond reprehensible idea, and the fact that students were even able to obtain a weak form of a love potion is absolutely insane to me. I mean, it almost killed Ron. Well, the meat almost killed Ron, but still. There is one scene in the books that really paints this as a dark portrait by a desperate person. And we don't really see it in the movies. Voldemort's mother uses a love potion in order to seduce Tom Riddle Sr. Dumbledore points out that she actually thinks it's a bit romantic when she does it. And this scene is truly much darker than most people think, mainly because we have pity on Merope because she's in an awful situation. And if you've just seen the movies, you don't know her name is actually Merope or Merope. I'm just going to say Merope. So Merope comes from the House of Gaunt. They are living in dirt and filth, and Merope is lambasted and abused every single day by her brother and her father for not really being able to do magic, which she actually was, but they were just ignorant and stupid because she was just shy and nervous, and she was being abused. It's tragic. So she looks to Tom Riddle Sr., who was riding on a horse one day, and she looks at him with longing and lust. She likely saw that as her only way out of this situation, to be honest. So at this moment, we just kind of picture her to be like a Cinderella character, where she lives a tragic life and is just waiting for her prince to come rescue her. But unfortunately, she doesn't wait. And when her father ends up going to prison, she seems to take matters into her own hands and gives a bit of water to Tom Riddle Sr., where she lightly spikes it with love potion. And so because Merope thinks that Tom Riddle Sr. will actually begin to love her when she gets pregnant and has been with Tom for a few weeks to months, she takes Tom off the love potion. And so Tom Riddle Sr. wakes up from this stupor and leaves immediately, like any sane person would do. And in some wild takes, I've actually heard people talk about how Tom Riddle Sr. was in the wrong here. And while I don't really like Tom Riddle Sr., and I think that in the books, it kind of just portrays him as like a Gaston-like character, someone that you don't really like, Merope rapes him. Definitively. It is rape. Even though you may feel sorry for Merope and lament her situation, and even though Tom Riddle Sr. might be a jerk and supremely annoying, this is completely wrong. And I think Rowling chose how she worded this carefully, because for someone who has experienced something like this, obviously not a love potion, but maybe like a date rape drug or someone stalking and harassing you or even being raped itself, sometimes people look on those situations and put some of the blame on you, or talk about the nobility of the other person, or even just write off the whole story in general. But it's actually no real question too that this is the real reason Tom Riddle is the way that he is, because of his mother's actions. Now, it's obviously not the full reason, as this is the nature-nurture discussion, and it's gone on for millennia that we're not going to solve from the Harry Potter series, but Voldemort is a psychopath because he was the child of rape and illegitimate love. Which again, goes to show the crux of the series and how love is the most powerful thing there is that exists in this world, and to fabricate that, to me, is significantly worse than death. To operate something or someone, just to operate something like a love potion, where the person has no ability to choose or think freely, which is the exact same thing as the Imperious Curse, is just wrong and disgusting. In a really subtle way as well, Slughorn knows all about this. And it's something I make note of all the time whenever I talk about the series. But in a potions classroom, where he has Polyjuice Potion, Veritaserum, Felix Felicis, Draught of Living Death, and Amortentia, he deems Amortentia, the most powerful love potion to exist, as the most dangerous potion. He says this: "When you have seen as much of life as I have, you will not underestimate the power of obsessive love." It is a legitimately scary thing. The potion itself literally means love held. And as much as I hate saying this, unless someone has experienced that, like the feeling of being love held, they likely won't think of this potion as being as dark as it really is. And the same is true of being tortured, or possibly seeing someone you love die. For the people who see and experience those things, they live in a totally different life than other people seeing the world like others don't. Which is why I think people who maybe have endured torture like Neville might think the Cruciatus curse is by far the most evil. But I stand here saying the Imperious one is the worst one. And while I've argued that over the idea of a love potion, I still think the argument stands because they are close to the same thing. It is taking the person's ability to choose away from them. And the darkness that can happen as a result of this can be a truly scary thing to think about. Think about what some of these dark characters would have the potential to do if they use this curse more often and on more people. Or maybe even these characters are using that, but it's just not in the actual story itself. Because there are characters with insanely subtle backstories that fans discuss. And just a quick trigger warning here, if you don't want this, skip 15 seconds ahead. But Greyback is said to have a certain affinity for children. Imagine what this man could do with the Imperious Curse if he had more free reign. Imagine Umbridge or Bellatrix being in control and having power and using the Imperious Curse for anything they want. The implications are pretty awful. And yes, in the books it's kind of seen as a joke. It's rarely ever used, and when it is, there's an element of comedy to it. But I think that's mainly because there aren't a lot of truly terrible wizards and witches using a curse that we see in the books. It's used by Harry, and Harry is good, he wants to save people, and he uses it for that. But for other people, it has a significantly darker potential, where, as many movies and books may point out, makes death a certain mercy at a point. I'm sure Tom Riddle Sr., depending on how the love potion actually works, because there's still a small, maybe there's still a small portion of your brain that is trying to escape. I don't really know, but maybe Tom Riddle Sr. would really think about that in this situation. Just not being able to escape, and in the back of his mind, he's overplaying that over and over and over. It's terrifying, truly. And the same is true for Rosmerta, where although Draco really isn't doing anything terrible, is without her ability to choose or do what she wishes for almost an entire book. It's the same idea of what Ginny went through in the first book when she was possessed. It's dark. And I think it's a brilliant bit of writing in the series for how subtle and under the radar it is, because I think people who have experienced this kind of thing truly know how dark it is and don't need it explained to them. So I mean, here I am. I don't really know why I'm making a video out of this, because here it is. I'm explaining this thing that doesn't really need to be explained, but I think that the Imperious Curse is easily the worst of the 3 unforgivable curses in the Harry Potter universe. But which one do you think it is? Let's debate this kindly, please, in the comments below, because I know this is a split question and everyone thinks something different about it. But let me know what you think below, like the video as well, subscribe for more Harry Potter content, and I'll see you in the next one.